What's that sound? It's For Amusement Only, the EM and Bingo Pinball Podcast. Welcome back to For Amusement Only. This is Nick Baldridge. So, last night I talked about what happened on Thursday with the Bingo Row at the York Show. Tonight I wanted to talk about Friday. So Friday first thing, I get to the hall and I meet a listener. And the listener was a friend of a guy who brought the Big Time Bingo. That was very cool. To have a listener interaction first thing, that was very nice. And he was a super nice guy, and I was really glad to have met him later on. So I did some initial fixing of a couple things. We tested all the games and figured out what was going on with them. And then I heard from somebody else that the GG that I brought was stuck in tilt. And so I said, okay, I'll go see what's going on there. How hard can it be? Well, I spent a good long time trying to figure out what was wrong. And I had this machine for sale. And I was asking what I thought was a pretty darn reasonable price for a working EM. Of course, at that point, it was not working. So I wanted to make sure I got it going. I took a look, and it was nothing super obvious, and so I whipped out the schematic, which I brought with me, and started tracing out the circuit. Now, the startup circuit on a Gottlieb is pretty simple. Almost anything makes a score motor turn, and that was not turning at all. And so I was checking the various relays and manipulating them by hand, and the score motor just would not turn. And nothing I did was making it turn. When I turned it in certain positions, it would do certain things that I expected it to do, but it wouldn't do very much. So, tracing stuff out, trying to figure it out, this listener comes up and he says, well, hey, have you checked the fuse? And I had looked at the fuse and looked okay, but I didn't have my meter on that part of the hall, and so I hadn't checked the fuse yet. So I said, okay, let me go grab that. I'll be right back. So I went and checked the fuse. Fuse was good. And then he suggested checking the voltage. And the voltage that I was getting was nothing. Like the meter was reading 0.7 millivolts or some ridiculous number. And it should have been 25 volts. And so I said, that's kind of weird. And so in order to rule out meter problems, I tested the primary, and it said 120 volts. And I said, okay, that makes sense. And I tested the GI circuit, and that was 6 volts. And I said, all right, that makes sense. So I tested 25 again, and it says point whatever millivolts. And I said, that's funky. And so I tested it straight on the transformer. And the transformer let out a big heaving spark. And I said, that's interesting. But it didn't register 25 volts. And so I unplugged the machine and started looking real closely at the wires, and one of them was broken off. And of course it was the one that fed the 25 volts. So I was pretty thrilled to have found it, but it took forever to find it. And I have no idea what happened there, because it must have been a cold solder situation, because it was just fine here, and it had been through multiple moves before that without work, from what I'm told. So interesting. But resoldered that, and the machine was working fine. So that was good. Fired off a test game, made sure everything was working, and then I had to let that go after re-leveling it. The back legs were put on one side, so it was listing pretty heavily to the left. So I adjusted that and then ran back to the bingo road because there was a lot to do. So the next thing I did was take a look at the bikini. The bikini had a lot of issues. It wouldn't start at all. It would switch between the different buttons, but it wasn't working appropriately beyond that. So I went in and started to troubleshoot, and luckily I had just worked on a bikini the week before the show, and so it was pretty fresh in my memory. I was able to go in and manipulate what needed to be manipulated and clean what needed to be cleaned in order to get the machine up and running. And so the machine fired up, and I said, all right, and played a test game. It worked. I got a 3 in line and pushed the R button, and it's registered the replays, and so I was pretty satisfied there. And then I went and started a new game and got the screen feature and had it register a win in a different colored section. And I think I did both of those with the glass on, so I was pretty pleased about that too. So that worked appropriately too. There was a minor issue with one of the colors, and I got that fixed. I think it was green. So the green is tied to the OK game, or the red letter, and it played the red letter games appropriately, although it was really reluctant to award the OK feature, and the machine needed to be shopped. It had been played a lot and had not been adjusted for a very long time, and so it needed some work done. Needed to be cleaned and, treated nicely. So got that one going. That was good. And then I went into bingo ambassador mode, and so the idea was that I would give away these autographed copies of Geoffrey Lawton's books to anyone that could make a 4 in line on any of the bingos. And so I typically would start people off with Gay Time because it was in really good shape. I know the game very well, and it's relatively easy to explain. Plus, you get some of the wow factor of the moving numbers and cool things that happen there. That's also something that allows you to get a 4 in line a bit easier than, say, ticker tape, where it's pure skill. You have to really nudge the machine into the appropriate position. So I started talking to people and got them going. We had 11 winners on Friday, including the listener who I talked to at the beginning of the day, which was cool. He also ended up buying the GG, so that was extra cool. And I hope I get to talk to him again soon. I hope that all works out for him. That GG had a lot of new parts, but it was cosmetically pretty rough in the cabinet. It had a good back glass and had an okay play field. So anyway, I hope that all worked out. But all the winners were very excited, and most of them were only there for Friday. So that was pretty neat. They got to experience the bingos and then leave with a little bit of history. It was cool. One of my favorite interactions was with a young guy who had never seen a bingo before, and he walks up, and Steve Smith actually coached him on his Golden Gate. And he managed to get the time tree up to after fifth, and he had a 4 in the yellow and white striped super section winner. That's what won him a book. But because he had after fifth and he had OK lit, he was able to reposition the screen in such a way that he had winners in each of the colors and an OK game. And he was super excited. The look on his face was amazing. We were telling him all this stuff, and then I said, "And you won a book." I said, "You're kidding." So it was cool. And what was really neat was to see people come back to the bingos after a period of time. So, they would go and they would experience a show, and then they would come back. I really enjoyed that. I got to meet the guy from FSPA Pinball on Twitter, at FSPA Pinball, and he won a book as well. A couple of Richmond guys who came up for the tournament, competitive guys, won books. And we had other young guys and ladies who got 4 in lines and won books. It was just so cool. It worked exactly as I hoped it would, and people really enjoyed playing the games. And just the look of surprise or amazement on their faces when they had made this really outstanding feat for a new bingo player, and realized that they earned this beautiful book about the history of these machines. It was just very satisfying, and worked exactly as I hoped it would. So hopefully those people left with a great appreciation for the machines, or at least a growing appreciation, and we'll spend the next year reading up on them before we bring some more games to York next year. So at the end of the day on Friday, Hugh Cowan, Jeff Lawton, myself, and Steve Smith, along with Jeff's son and Hugh's wife, went out to eat dinner. So we had a little mini bingo dinner that night, and that was a great time. I got to spend some good quality time with Hugh, who I had never met in person until Thursday. And he is a super nice guy. And on top of being super nice, he knows an awful lot of stuff about the bingos, about everything. So it was cool to have his attention, and he was willing to talk to me, tell me some stories, and Jeffrey as well. It was incredible to have all that knowledge right there. Now, I had hoped to be able to use opportunities like that to record some podcast audio, but here's the thing. At the shows, I've heard other shows attempt to do podcast audio, and I'm a little hard of hearing, and it's very hard for me to pick out voices over a crowd. I do what I can. It's a little easier in person because I can see the person's lips. Not that I can read lips, but it certainly helps. But whenever I hear podcasts do that, I have a really hard time hearing what's going on. So I decided against doing that after I realized we were right in front of a row of jukeboxes, which were on and running for, I'd say a good half of the show. At some points, it was kind of cool to have the jukebox audio behind us. They didn't pick records which were particularly irritating to listen to or anything, but it was very loud. Jukeboxes are loud in general, and so I knew that with just my phone, which is all that I had, I wouldn't be able to record anything substantial. And at the diner, it just didn't seem opportune, and it was also loud there. It was packed. So I apologize for not having audio there, but I did learn an awful lot, which I intend to pass on to you all over time. But that was the amazing Friday that I had. Nothing really exploded. There was a burn coil that happened early in the morning, and I smelled it. Said, "What's that smell?" Instead of "What's that sound?" Sniffed around all the bingos and couldn't find it, and it turned out it was something further down from us. Luckily, for us anyway. I always feel bad at the shows when coil burns, because it's not great to have that happen at the show. If you don't have a good stock of parts, which of course I didn't, then it becomes a little difficult. So, anyway, that was my Friday experience. Thank you very much for listening. My name again is Nick Baldridge. You can reach me at foramusementonlypodcast@gmail.com, or you can call me on the Bingos line. That's 724-BINGOS1. 724-246-4671. You can listen to us on iTunes, Stitcher, Pocket Cast, via RSS, on Facebook, on Twitter at Bingo Podcast. You can follow me on Instagram at nbaldridge, or you can listen to us on our website, which is foramusementonly.libsyn.com. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll talk to you next time.